Good evening, everyone. Hi, thank you. How's everybody doing? Good? Excellent. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jarett Wieselman. I'm the editorial director for ETonline. I'm very excited to be here tonight to moderate a Q&A with the star of the film you just saw, Killing Kennedy, ladies and gentlemen, Michelle Trachtenberg.
Oh, it's very inside the actor's studio.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So does... No, okay. Congratulations on the film. It's fantastic. I really was very struck. It was interesting because I think for a lot of people, this film tells a side to this story that we really didn't know. When you read the script, what was the first thing you remember thinking about this project?
I honestly was floored. I remember being a huge fan of the Oliver Stone movie, and I'd always been fascinated with the story because I wasn't alive during that time. And reading the script, I had no idea of Lee Harvey Oswald's backstory. I actually was completely unaware that he had a wife. I sort of feel like when we're all so familiar now with the story that we've villainized Lee Harvey Oswald so much that no one actually realizes he had a home life. He had a wife, he had children, and I was one of those people. I had no idea. I just thought he was sort of, like a lone ranger and a lunatic going after something. So I was fascinated by his character arc and complimentary by Marina's character arc. And I just love the fact that she was Russian. With my heritage, my roots are Russian, and I just was really excited to bring this woman to life again because she is actually alive and one of the only, or she is the only person in the film, I believe, that's still alive. There might be some police officers that are around as well, but Marina is alive, and her two daughters, Rachel and June, are both in their 50s.
Was there an opportunity to meet with her? Did you want to? Was that something you toyed with?
It was definitely something I toyed with. I did very much want to meet her. However, I knew after, I also did ridiculous amounts of research, as much as I could possibly get my hands on, because Marina wasn't really a known entity in this whole story. There actually isn't that much plush research like there is on JFK and Jackie and Lee. But I was able to get my hands on a discontinued book called Marina and Lee. And it was, I believe, the only book that she sat down with the writer after the assassination, after her husband was murdered or killed, or however you want to say it, shot by Jack Ruby. So I was able to get her backstory and her decision-making process to come to America with Lee. So by reading this, honestly, I was a little trepidatious in meeting her because she, even from the pages of this, out-of-print book, she screamed to be a strong woman. And I slightly feared her in the best possible way. I didn't want to make her angry. I just really worked as hard as I could to honor her. And I felt that it was best that I meet her afterwards and hear what she thought about it, as opposed to hearing anything that she might be worried about, which might then lead me in the filming and the acting of it to be like, oh, shoot, I don't want to mess this up because she might be unhappy. So that was sort of thing. But I look forward to meeting her if she would ever entertain that option.
In general, with your acting, are you someone who does a lot of research? Do you find that helpful to your process?
Yeah, this was, to be honest, I worked my tuchus off for this. I did as much research as I could possibly get my hands on and looked at images of her because an image, particularly at that time, without any filters or Photoshop or Instagrams or whatever, the images really captured the actual moment of what was happening. So I just wanted to make sure that everything I did was complimentary, and the process was just every day being conscious of the life decisions I think that she made. Was that the root of your question? I think I forgot it in the intro.
No, that's okay. Well, no, but we can elaborate on that because whether it's this role or other roles, is research something you always do?
Yes. So this was The most research I've ever done for a character, because she's a real life person. I didn't have to do much research for Buffy.
There are plenty of keys you could interview to see what that's like,
Right,
Michelle. I'm
thank
just
you.
saying.
I'm the key to the world, FYI. Yes, no, I had only, the funny thing with Buffy was I was a huge fan of the show before I was on it, so I'd seen every episode, so that was my research. And the only additional research I had to do, I'll never forget one episode, I made a reference of Hogwarts. And I go to Joss Whedon. I'm like, I don't know what Hogwarts is. And he like pulled me off set. He's like, this is not going to work. And it was like 3 books in already in this series. And he had them delivered within an hour. He's like, start reading. So that was that research. But I don't think that really counts for research. Gossip Girl didn't take much research. I just knew, oh, be an Upper East Side bitchy character. Okay, I've met several of them. So this was definitely the most thorough, and I actually have to do a shout out to Jeffrey Lyons, because his son is a good friend of mine, Ben, and when he heard I was doing the movie, Jeffrey is actually a huge JFK buff and sent me obscure DVDs and newsletters and different information points that he had, but he himself also said that there is not really a lot of information available on Marina.
In a weird way, though, does that fact make it easier to play her? For example, what's on Rob and Ginnifer's shoulders playing JFK and Jackie, they're so iconic. Did you feel a little more freedom to build this woman who was real, but we don't have as many touchstones for?
Arguably. I mean, Ginny and I have actually talked about this at length, because she was, pretty nervous to take on the character of Jackie, and, all the iconic images that we have of her. And so there was a lot of stress and pressure for her, and she made a conscious decision of not emulating Jackie's speech to the T, because it was very affected and it wouldn't have sounded real. For me, yes, people don't know Marina, which would be less pressure, but I went through the whole movie thinking this woman might actually be sitting on her couch watching this program. Yeah. So it was, which is the worst evil. Mm-hmm. Not that they're all evil, but it's all good. Right, no. But so it was just a personal connection, because I felt so connected to her. So half and half. Yeah.
With the working the took us off, obviously a lot of that probably stemmed from
don't worry.
stemmed from the accent and getting her speech right. What was important to you in terms of creating her dialect?
Oh, it was honestly one of my biggest fears, and it was one of the actual main reasons why I backed away from the project. I read the script, I loved it, I loved the story, and I was petrified. I am of Russian descent, but I'm an American. I speak English. Russian is my second language. I'm not grammatically correct in it. I can't conjugate very well in Russian. And so the biggest challenge was deciding how heavy to take the accent. When the script was originally written, 90% of it had Marina speaking Russian and in subtitles. And then when I came on board the project, there was a conversation of doing it a little bit more English, which I was actually more nervous about, because, to be blunt, Marina didn't speak a word of English when she came to America. So she had to learn everything. And a real off-the-boat, Russian person that comes to America kind of sounds like Boris and Natasha. She's like, hello, how are you? And I had to make the choice, like Ginny did with Jackie's accent. I was like, I think that might be. So I took that creative, little leeway there. And it was a balance. I leaned very heavily on my mom, who has a very light Russian accent. And I worked with her. She translated the entire script for me phonetically, because I don't read or write in Russian, because that's impossible. It's really hard. But so every line she wrote out phonetically for me. Winked at her, don't worry about it. She's right there. She's gonna blush. And we worked also to change how I speak Russian to how a woman in the 60s would speak Russian, because it is a very different way. You don't speak like, oh, I couldn't do that. You're like, oh, I'm not able to do that. So everything was a complete choice, very specific, and my mom was constantly, like 24 hours during shooting, on call to be like, how do you pronunciate this again? How is this said? So there was a lot of detail. And then I had to translate some stuff for Will, and I was like, oh, good luck. Like, I can't, like, your pronunciation is not on point. Totally cool. We'll work through this.
If the script was written with the majority of her dialogue in Russian, do you know if they were trying to find a Russian actress? And
They were.
They were.
They were, actually. And the funny, they were pretty much like, this is going to be a Russian girl, no American actress other than, like, you know, Mila Kunis or Jovovich can speak that well. And it's funny because my agents have always known that I speak Russian, and it was actually my manager who brought it up. She's like, oh, I think this could really be, you know, great. And I called my agent. I was like, oh, you know, I like this. She's a big fancy TV agent. And she's like, you speak Russian? Really? And when they contacted Carmen Cuba, who did our casting, she was like, she speaks Russian? Okay. And they totally didn't believe it. They were like, no, thanks. I'm sure she speaks like da and yet, and that would be about it. And I kind of had to find my way for it, because I love when someone doesn't believe I can do something. That's cool. I have no ego. No matter what level you are in your career, whatever place you are in your career, if you want a job, you effing go out there and hustle for it.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. And I did, and I went in to do a reading with Carmen Cuba, and literally after the tape, she's like, I don't know what the fuck you said, but it sounded really good. And so I was like, sweet, spasiba. Like, and then she literally turned to her assistant and was like, was that Russian? I don't know, great. And that's how it all sort of happened, because, and actually it was funny because I credit my mom with this. The morning of the audition, I was like, I can't do this. I memorize in English. I'm on point when I memorize in English. I can't, you know, remember the line in English in my head, translate it to Russian in a time period that's quick enough for it not to look like I've forgotten my line. Right. And she literally, like, took the coffee out of my hand and was like, you get in there. Like, I don't want to hear anything from you. You get in there. So she really pushed me to it when I had the fears that morning of it, and we're here now. Absolutely. So, thanks.
In general, are you someone who is good at auditioning? Do you feel like it's something that you have talent in? Because, I mean, for a lot of actors, auditioning is where you're doing the most acting of your entire career.
Yes. Let's just get one thing straight. Auditioning sucks. It sucks no matter what, who, where, how you are. It is the worst process in the world. You're pretty much asked to come in to a situation where the producers and director have been sitting there for probably 3 hours. They've seen every girl do the same shtick as you think you're gonna do a new thing of. Not really. And you're supposed to be like, this is my dog and pony show, unless it's a serious character and they're like, this is my dog and pony show. And it is the worst process ever. I've actually been in audition situations where I've looked at a producer who got on his iPhone and looked at him like, I don't like you. Because I worked really hard and you suck. I've said that before, which I do not recommend. But I have, because it's mean. You know, when I've been acting for as long as I have, I'm very lucky to definitely get things offered to me, which is amazing and great, and I'm very grateful for that every day. But that also means that's because I've worked for so long to get to that point. But like I said earlier, if you want something, every other girl that's in your category, that's in your playing field, also wants it. So what's gonna make you stand out? If this and this person says, I'm only gonna be offered this, cool. I would like to go and read and show you that I can do it just as well as you may think she is, or whatever. I just want to show you this is my passion. But auditions suck. So, you just cross your fingers, and honestly, the nerves have to go. This is the one thing that I've heard a lot of actors say, oh, I never hold my sides. I have to be off book. I'm off book, but I hold my sides. I've held my sides for 25 years in auditions. It may or may not be the right advice, but for me, it's a security blanket. And as long as you're off book and you have it by your side, they can't knock you for that. And sometimes I'd like to argue that by holding your sides, you're amenable to direction. So there's that part.
Well, speaking of the 25 years that you've been doing this.
Yes.
Do you remember when...
And it's so strange, I'm only 18.
Everyone's 18 in Los Angeles.
Obviously.
But you've been acting since a very young age. I mean, you've done commercials.
3, yeah.
Do you remember the first time you actually consciously wanted to act?
Oh, I mean, people may think this is a lie, but I wanted to act since I was out of the womb. I was like, hello. I could have been Barbara. That was pretty much it. I actually did my very first job, and I don't think this is really known that much. I technically started acting at 16 months old, right? Yeah, okay, thanks. Fact checker. 16 months old, it was for a Pampers commercial. They did an open cattle call, which that was more of a New York term. It was like literally hundreds of kids would show up to this one audition in hopes of getting the job. And someone's like, oh, that's a cute baby. I was blonde and blue-eyed and didn't cry that much. And so I went on this Pampers audition, and I was booked to be the main baby. And it was huge, and it was a 2 or 3 day shoot. And the first day went amazing. They were like, oh my God, perfect baby. I don't know what happened later, but it was really good in the moment. So day 2, I had to run across artificial grass to my fake mom holding open a towel. And I was petrified of the grass. To this day, I actually have, I don't want to say a fear, but a great dislike of grass. There's Lyme disease in it. I don't want to mess with the grass. I don't like it. It feels weird. I can't. It's so gross. So I, as a 16-month-old baby, was like, oh, hell no. And I started crying, and my mom pulled me offside. She's like, I'm not putting my kid through this. And Pampers is like, okay, we'll sue your baby. And she's like, cool, go sue a baby. And so obviously they didn't sue me, but she pulled me off. So that part I don't remember. But at 3 years old, I saw a commercial on TV, and a little girl was playing with her Barbie. And I go to mom, was like, I need that Barbie at 3. So it's like, I need that Barbie. I hope I had a better voice than that. And I just remember thinking, well, wait a minute. If I'm the girl on TV playing with Barbie, I probably get to keep the Barbie. And then we found out a manager who was auditioning kids in New York, and you had to go see her with 10 4x6 photos, because back in those days, we printed photos. And we went to see her. Her name was Donna Malo. And she sent me on my very first commercial audition, which was a Whisk detergent commercial. And I booked it. And I vividly remember having to spill cranberry juice on my dad and saying, whisk, 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 tisk, tisk, tisk. But I do remember being really upset about spilling the cranberry juice because I'd always been told not to spill food. So that was my first memory. And throughout my entire career, my mom was always like, oh, go have a play date. I'm like, or we can go on an audition. And it was honestly always my choice. I think that's why I'm, knock on wood, still here and sitting with you today, because it was always my choice and always something I loved more than anything.
Absolutely. That was my next question, because I feel like if it's a passion, do you see so many young actors who are clearly being pushed there by their parents? It almost sounds like you had the opposite experience.
Complete opposite. It was literally, oh, you have this play date with this person, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I want another Barbie. Granted, I had an end goal. It was toys, but as I got older, it still became a choice. I just became happiest on set. Even when I was in school, I was like, I love learning, and this is great, but I could be also learning so much on set.
Well, I was going to ask because it strikes me that you've worked almost completely steadily since that Whisk commercial at 16 months old. But
That was at 3 years old. Don't get it twisted.
Sorry.
Oh, you're
Sorry.
fat.
Always aging them up in
I got my
Hollywood.
SAG card at 4, I think.
For what? Do you remember?
It was after a series of commercials. It was after like Kleenex. Actually, if anyone can find the Kleenex commercial on YouTube, which I don't think exists, but I actually have a slight Russian accent in it because I say Kleenex is made with a potion, or it's supposed to be Kleenex is made with a lotion, and the gimmick was the little girl says Kleenex is made with a potion, and I go, Kleenex is made with a portion. And that was totally there. So I guess I really had a Russian accent at one point.
Since the beginning. But my question for you is, do you feel like you got a complete acting workshop, everything you need to know on set? I mean, it seems to me it was all practical. There was no time to really study in a more traditional sense.
Yeah, no, I'm a weird anomaly. I've never had any acting lessons or classes. I think they're really wonderful for people. Just for me, it just wasn't right. My one experience going to an acting coach, I forget what project it was, but it was some indie movie. I was already maybe, I don't know, 11 or 12. I was already in tenure in my career, and it was some very fancy movie. And I went in to read naturally, and it was like a 12-year-old hooker, because that's cool. And I'm like smoking a cigarette in the scene, and I did the audition, and the casting director like walked out to my mom's like, oh my God, she nailed it. I'm bringing her back for a director. And it was some big fancy director, like a real, I don't remember who it was. And my agent at the time, and when you were in New York, you had a manager, but you sort of freelanced with agents. So whatever agent got the casting call, they would be, oh, okay, I'm going to grab Michelle for this and submit her for it. The agent was like, oh, she should go see this amazing acting coach. And I went to see the acting coach, and the acting coach had me switch every single thing that I did. She's like, show me what you did in the audition. And I did. And she had me switch literally every choice. And I went back for my callback, and the casting director, like I could just see her face fall. And she called my manager afterwards, like, I don't know what happened between her first audition and now. And honestly, that emotionally scarred me from acting coaches. I know that there are brilliant coaches out there and amazing classes, and a lot of my friends have benefited from them. But I can honestly say, like, I would need therapy before I go to another acting coach again, because I lost that job. And then Nicole Kidman got it. No, I'm kidding.
So I was like, really? Going up for a lot of parts, the two of you.
Really,
Constant competition.
Always fighting. That
Hollywood
lady.
rivalry, classic Hollywood rivalry.
That Nicole Kidman.
So how do you sort of describe your process then? Are you someone who journals? How do you get into a character?
I really just try to give her a backstory. I try to imagine if there were no words on the page, what would her instinctual reactions be? I try to, with the bits of information, I never try to figure out a character before I've reached the end, because the character's choices at the end of a script dictate their emotions in the beginning. Because their emotions in the beginning have obviously led them to make the choice that they've made at the end. So I reach the end of a script and I start thinking, what would they think? What would they wear? What would they see? How would they, carry their hair? In terms of lines, when I've got the job, for me, it's just a process of memorization. I never practice emotion beforehand. I'm actually, I think possibly one of my flaws is that I'm not a fan of rehearsal. I'm not a theater actor. I greatly admire theater actors. I've often been asked to do plays. It's not my process. Like the weeks and weeks of rehearsing, to me, it's just like, oh, I'm more of an instinctual person. And, I've worked with actors that really don't appreciate that in the past because they're very method. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, for me, rehearsal is just for words. So I've got my words memorized. Yes, okay, it says I cry at this point in the script. I don't know what you're gonna do. As humans, in this interaction, I don't know what you're gonna do. I don't know what that person's gonna do. I don't know what you're gonna do. Why am I preemptively guessing that I'm gonna have a crying reaction to how you speak to me? So even though it says in the script, oh, she's, really sad and storms off, well, you don't know what's gonna happen in the scene. So for me, take one is arguably rehearsal. because I want to hear, acting is listening and reacting. I want to hear what you've got, even if your method and you've planned and you've TD's, oh, okay, and you're like going in the, like Rain Man thing, and you're like, I got this, 45 toothpicks. Like, no, you need to allow me my process, I allow you your process. So I'll respect that your method if you respect that I'm gonna react to you. Right. And that's pretty much how I do. And granted, it's, some directors get really freaked out about it. Right. But my always thing is call action. And if you don't like it, change it. So we'll see.
How does that process, historically in your experience, mesh with creators like someone like Joss, for example, who has a very specific idea of how his lines are delivered and the effect that they have when they land? How does that mesh for you?
Well, I was younger and less outspoken. Joss is a creative genius. He writes in, this iambic pentameter way where the rule was he trusted his actors, which is a huge luxury. And he would never hire someone that he didn't think could act out his vision. Mm-hmm. However, his words were meant to be spoken exactly. So there were no, if it was written could not, you were not going to say couldn't. And that was a great training process. It was a great school for me. I started the show at 14, and did when I was 17. And that was, I guess that would be my acting class, knowing that writers write things for a certain reason, and you learn and you observe the other actors at what they do and decide what's best for you.
And I believe you've never seen Buffy or any of your work, right? You're not someone who can watch themselves.
No, it took me like 15 years to watch Harriet the Spy. So, yeah, I think I've seen one episode of Buffy, or I saw like a clip where it's the episode where I slit my wrists only because I wanted to see how the prosthetics looked. I really don't like watching myself, and there's a really specific reason. I'm a female, and the vanity aspect of it is, like, oh God, why do I look like that? I shouldn't have worn those yellow pants, which I did on Buffy. There's those like a yellow pair of corduroy pants that haunt my dreams, not from having seen it, just from wearing them alone. So the last time that I watched dailies, I was doing Ice Princess. I was 18. And they're like, okay, you're the star of the movie, here are your dailies. And I watched them, and I saw the facial expressions I was making, and it was like, oh, I don't know if I can skate. And the next day, I came to set after watching dailies, and I had to be like afraid, and I was like, I'm so afraid right now. And my face didn't move because I knew what it looked like when my face moved. So I kind of really stopped from that point because I wanted the freedom of not knowing what this looks like on screen. And if that felt natural in a scene, to be able to do that. Because at the end of the day, I am a girl, and I look at myself in pictures, I'm like, oh, I don't like that, or whatever. When you watch yourself on screen, the other thing is you can't change it. When it's a final cut of something, you're not gonna be like, oh, we should really pick that other I did so much, but why are you gonna kill yourself over it? It's not worth it. The director chose that, that's what's up. And I don't really watch myself because I want the liberty of making the expressions that feel natural to me in a scene without being concerned of my forehead wrinkle. So
Totally makes sense.
I did see one episode of Gossip Girl, though. Okay. The finale.
Right.
Yeah.
Damn.
Oh my God. I don't even remember. The people were like, Chuck and Blair. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm like, by season 6, we were only reading our scenes. We don't know the storyline.
Well, that actually leads me to my next question, because if you're not watching the output,
yes,
obviously you're growing through the experience itself.
Yes.
For you, which professional job has been the best learning experience, and why?
Hard-hitting questions. I mean, Buffy was definitely a school. That was a school of learning. Actually did a short-lived show on NBC that only ran for a season called Mercy. Mm-hmm. It was a huge learning experience to be honest, because not all of the cast members got along to an extreme. And it was a learning experience for me to try to figure out how to get past the fact that we don't like each other. A lot of it had to do with process. My process was different from, the other actors in it. Their process was different from the other actor in it. I live for James LeGros, though. Every day that man walks on set is a dream. I think that was the most challenging because I had to fight through my personal feelings to on-set antics. Because the other thing from Buffy that I learned, don't be late, know your lines, hit your mark. Ooh. Ooh, it's so shocking in this day and age. It's those three simple things. And sometimes that doesn't happen. And I think that's the challenge for me, is accepting that people don't have the rigid discipline structure that I do on set, moving past that and still allowing your character to be true without mixing your personal life into it.
Do you find, I mean, maybe you don't, but do you find that that work ethic stems from how long you've been doing this? I mean, do you find that kind of work ethic? I understand this is a gross generalization, but in new actors, I mean, is it something that only comes from having done this for a long time?
Yes and no, because certain actors that have reached very massive levels of fame feel that they can show up 3 hours late for their call times. Like huge A-list actors that I've worked with, it's like, oh, where's, oh, so-and-so's not here. like that's the acting god saying, don't say a name. Yes, no, hold please. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's upbringing. I had a very strict and amazing upbringing. I say strict in that it was always instilled in me, respect others. Sure. I also am very, very cognizant of the fact that I'm getting a nice paycheck. The guy holding the light is not getting the same paycheck. He has a family to go home to. Shut up, say our lines, do your job, let him go home. So I don't know that new actors have that awareness. And some even more established actors do have that awareness and still don't give a crap. Yeah. It's just not within my makeup. I have respect for other people. And at the end of the day, when your crew loves you, you shine. And crews, this is my one thing, crews always talk. If you mess up with one crew, they will tell the other crew, and you'll run into the persons from the first crew. Don't mess with your crew. That's it.
Having worked in both, having worked in film and television, the experience for the actor is very different because you are telling a closed-ended story in one case, and on television, you are telling a story that could go anywhere.
Right.
You know, I mean, you on Buffy over 3 years, you probably were a completely different person at the end that you thought you would be at the beginning.
Right.
Do you enjoy one more than the other? Do you get something more professionally out of one?
I mean, I always thought Dawn would get a boyfriend, and that never happened, so I was really pissed. I did always beg Joss, like, can I get a boyfriend? He's like, no. That sucks. But you get to make out with a vampire, and then he kills you. No, I survived that. I love doing movies, because, yes, it's in and out, and it's great, and you don't have the chance to hate the people you work with. I'm kidding. But like on Gossip Girl, we all had a great time. We were all friends. I mean, 6 years, is a long time to be with a group of people, and we were a family. And it was fun going to set and seeing them every day. So whereas I prefer arguably acting-wise a movie, because you know that you have to freaking deliver right there in the 2 hours. In TV, you can get slightly lazier because you have a little more time for your character to evolve. But both schedules are grueling. And honestly, I used to always say that movies were my favorite, but now with the impressive slew of television rolling out, like, Scandal and whatnot, I kind of love what TV is doing, and especially now that cable is involved, you can really show some great stuff.
Well, it's interesting because I feel like Killing Kennedy is one of the first roles that you have the opportunity to play where you're sort of playing another age than we've ever really seen from you. I mean, you're playing a mother, she's someone who has children, you went from like destroying people's lives on your cell phone last time. You know, I mean,
Georgina had a baby. Okay.
That's right,
she was a
did.
mother.
She cared about him
You
a
never
lot,
saw
too.
the baby in the last season, but, he
you
was
know,
there-ish.
It strikes me that this does sort of represent the next phase, an intentional phase of a career. I mean, is it fair to say that looking forward now, when you pick roles, you're looking for things that are more of the Killing Kennedy ilk than necessarily like the high school ilk?
First of all, ilk, nice job. Good word of the day. My sister is very happy about that. Yes. We do words of the day all the time. Zephyr. Google it. Seriously, no one knows what it is. So I'm very particular now on roles. I'm lucky in Hollywood that I look very young, but my brain isn't. My future hopes for my acting career aren't young. I'm 28 now, which in my head is pushing 30, and my manager's like, if you fucking say you're pushing 30 one more time, I will kill you. I'm like, dude, it's fine. I still look young. But I'm passing on the high school roles. I'm passing on the college roles, unless literally Scorsese is like, I want you to play a 14-year-old. I'm like, sounds great. I will tape my boobs down, whatever you want. But yes, Killing Kennedy for me was great. Marina is actually younger than I am, but yes, it's a significantly more adult, mature role. And for me, just where I am in my career, I'm also writing a lot now. I'm WGA, sorry to drop other union names in here. But these are my passion projects to have longevity. I feel like, it's like the 90210 thing, the original, where, you had great, awesome actors in their late 20s playing these kids, and they weren't able to age as much out of it. So I'm really adamant right now in playing two age roles, just because, if you film a movie now that's in college, when it comes out, I'll be 29, 30, and I'd feel a little weird playing a college freshman when I'm 30 and saying like, go see my movie, I'm a college freshman, I'm 30. It doesn't really make sense in my head. So yes, for me, I think going to the roles that are more mature do give you more respect, and respect does get you into the jobs that you've always dreamed of.
There's obviously a huge business component to acting. I think a lot of actors will say that they came to this for the craft and ended up in meetings with lawyers the majority of their life. I mean, for you, how do you feel like you seem to have like a really amazing grasp on the business? Do you think it's just based on the amount of time you've spent in it and you've sort of learned how it works, the ins and outs of it?
Yeah, it's funny because my sister's going to roll her eyes right now, but I've been talking ad nauseum about this documentary. You guys should all see it, Casting By.
Oh, so good.
It's,
yeah.
I mean, it made me like burst out into tears. I understand what the business was. It's hard for me to understand what the business is now. Casting By really shows exactly what I mean. Marion Doherty not only made a name for herself as a casting director, she discovered every actor that we look up to now. Al Pacino, Bette Midler, Dustin Hoffman, Jon Voight, like everyone that has had phenomenal acting careers, Marion Doherty plucked and discovered. And that used to be what Hollywood was about. It used to be that the actor that goes into the room, that does the most amazing job, that knocks everyone out of their seats, that gives us tingles, that's who gets the job. It's not the case anymore. And to be blunt, I've often heard, when I'm fighting for a role, and there's a lot of, name your people up for it, often my agents will call me, and, my agent's real fancy pants. He reps a lot of fancy Oscar winners and whatnot, and he took this kid on, and he said to me, the feedback was amazing, and you did the most phenomenal job. They're going to go with Kristen Stewart. And I'm like, she's a good actress. Why? That's sort of the name of our game now. You know, she's had massive movie franchises. Several of male actors have had huge box office hits. Our industry is now really dictated by box office and money. That's why I've always really tried to balance like a box office movie with an indie movie. But you know, you're getting to this other stage now where the indie movies can only be financed by the people in the box office hits. I have been lucky to, you know, sneak into opportunities here and there. I understand the way the industry is now, but I would prefer to understand it the way that I hope it will go back to being. And that's the best actor that fights for their job gets the role. And it does happen, you know, every so often.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask you this in closing. We've heard a lot of really amazing pieces of advice from you this evening.
Oh,
what?
thanks.
I don't know.
All right.
What is the best piece of acting advice you've ever received?
Spilled some water. What is the best piece of acting advice I've ever received? I don't know. That's a hard one. Sometimes actors don't want to give other actors advice.
Right.
They're like, get out of my showbiz. I don't know what that was. But on a technical level, it is what I said before: show up on time, know your lines, get on your mark, show your face. On another level, I've personally always said when I stop loving what I'm doing, I'm gonna stop fighting for it, and you know, maybe foray into something else. Acting is, I always think of, what is it, Dustin Hoffman, Sir Laurence Olivier, it's like, it's just acting. Yeah. I think that's the best advice that anyone can give or get ever. It's just acting. It's not that deep. Love what you do, but don't think you're the most important thing in the room, and then things will fall into place.
I love it. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you to all of you for having us.
So
Thank you to the
much.
SAG
Thank
Foundation.
you.
Have a lovely evening.
I'm gonna like break it.